So Kim, we've been doing a couple of videos where we saw how slavery has became more and more of a political issue as we're going through the early 1800s, and you go all the way to the Compromise of 1850, the Fugitive Slave Act. It really starts to anger, especially many, definitely abolitionists who are always and very against slavery on moral arguments, but also a lot of the anti-slave folks. Republican Party forms, and then we have the election of Abraham Lincoln in, if we zoom in on this timeline, so this is from 1860 to 1870, where we zoom in there, and if we really zoom in on the early part of that decade, Lincoln gets elected in November of 1860, which seems, at least based on this timeline, to start catalyzing a whole chain reaction of things.
Yeah, this is a time when things happen really fast. So Lincoln is elected in November of 1860, but this is before we have our modern election timeline when presidents are actually take office in January. Presidents in this time period didn't take office until March. So there's this huge lame duck period where everyone's kind of wondering what's going to happen when Lincoln actually takes the presidency.
And the lame duck is the current president during the election is Buchanan.
James Buchanan.
And he's the lame duck. Someone else has been elected, and he has to kind of pretend to be president for 5 months until the actual inauguration.
Right. This is no president's favorite time when everyone knows that a new president is going to be coming in, and so their influence is waning. But what's important in this time period is that after Lincoln is elected, and as we talked about in the last video, without a single Southern vote.
He wasn't even on the ballot.
He wasn't even on the ballot for most places. Southern states start to think about what they're going to do. So they know that Lincoln is an anti-slavery president. They think that having Lincoln in office is going to be a direct challenge to the institution of slavery. So in this period of a few months from December at the end of 1860 to February in 1861, the Southern states think about what they're going to do. They send commissioners around saying, do you think we should secede? Yeah, probably we should secede. So in this 2-month period, what they call the Secession Winter, 7 states in the South secede.
And at this point, did they think that this is an act of war by seceding, that, or do they think, hey, no, we can secede if we want to?
Yeah, I think they don't really know whether the United States is going to act decisively to try to keep them in the Union. They're just waiting to find out.
And so we get to, so at this point, Lincoln is waiting to become president. James Buchanan is the president. I guess he's not really in a position to do much of anything. When does this become an all-out war?
So Lincoln actually takes office in March of 1861, and shortly thereafter, a Southern fort off the coast of Charleston, South Carolina, Fort Sumter, they let him know that they're running out of supplies. So this is a federal fort, which reports to Washington, D.C., which is in a way sort of trapped behind this enemy line in South Carolina, a state that has seceded. So Lincoln says, all right, well, I'm going to send you a ship to resupply you. And when the ship gets to the Charleston harbor, Southern forces from South Carolina fire on this ship.
And Lincoln wasn't naive. He knew that these states had now seceded for a few months. That especially South Carolina, he knew that, I mean, it was going to be viewed as him replenishing a fort on their, like, from their point of view, on their territory.
Right, from their point of view. I mean, you could also have just said, here are some hungry men, I'm getting them some food, let me put my boat into the harbor, I'll get them their supplies, and then I'll leave. So I think it's really up to the Southerners whether they, use this as an opportunity to reject federal authority.
And was it just food, or were there arms and?
Well, it's a federal fort, so, it was everything they needed to keep this fort running.
Okay, so it seems like on both sides, people knew where this was going, that, hey, if war breaks out, the South Carolina is going to say, hey, we don't want this thing replenished. In fact, we want to take that fort. It's on from their point of view, on their territory. Lincoln's like, hey, I'm not going to let this whole secession thing go. I want to replenish the force that I'm probably going to need. And then what happens?
So after the Southerners fire on this Union boat, Lincoln realizes that this rebellion is very serious, and so he calls for 75,000 volunteers to come into the army and suppress the rebellion.
I said this is shortly after the.
Right. This is just days after the
Okay.
April firing on Fort Sumter.
So 75,000 volunteers, which is
Yeah.
massive by any standards, but the country was a lot smaller then than it is today.
Yeah, there were only about 30 million Americans at that time. So this, the country is literally 10 times smaller than it is today. So 75,000 volunteers is a lot.
Yeah, yeah. And then what does that catalyze?
Well, now war is serious. The United States is gathering an army, and the southern states know that this U.S. army is going to invade. So these.
And from their point of view, it's an invasion. From from Abraham Lincoln's point of view, they view it as this is a rebellion, and we're just going to quell the rebellion.
Right. So the southern states, they think we're our own country. They've named themselves the Confederate States of America. Lincoln doesn't accept that they're their own country. He says these are just some states that are in rebellion as part of the United States.
Yeah, and then and at that point, I mean, is it all out? We've only had 7 states secede.
Right. So there are a few states that are still sort of on the fence after Lincoln's inauguration. They feel strong cultural unity with the United States, but these are slave states. And so after Lincoln calls for these 75,000 volunteers, that kind of pushes them over the edge. It says, all right, this is going to be war. It's going to be a war over whether slavery exists. We care about the existence of slavery, and so we're going to join with the Confederates in the Confederate States of America, join the rebellion. Most notable among these is Virginia. Virginia is not one of the original states that secedes, and most of the action in the Civil War is actually going to take place in Virginia. And Virginia's greatest general, Robert E. Lee, is then pushed to, in his mind, defend Virginia and become the leading general for the Confederate States of America.
Geographically, it's right at the border. Obviously, they're home to a major military figure. And they were an economically powerful state.
Yes, absolutely.
And so then at that point, it's all out war.
It's all out war. And in July of that year, there's really the first battle of the Civil War. At this point, the first couple of months, everyone is just gearing up for war. But the forces of the United States and the forces of the South finally meet in battle at what we call the Battle of Bull Run, which is in Manassas, Virginia, northern Virginia today. And, people really think at this point that it's going to be a crushing defeat for the South. In fact, people don't even really know what war is like. There are stories that civilians from nearby, they packed a picnic to come sit on the hill above this battle and watch it, sort of like we might watch a football game now. And they were quickly disillusioned of what war was actually like. They had to run for their lives because this was a violent battle, and it showed that it was not going to be a quick war. The South decisively wins this battle, and so from that point forward, they know it's going to be a very long and bloody conflict.
And one other interesting, you mentioned the first 7 states secede. Then you have, Lincoln building up a real army. Then you have 4 more states secede. These are, even though some of these states feel an affinity to the United States, they are slave states, but not all the slave states left.
Right. There are 4 more slave states that stick around. Most important of those is Maryland. And Maryland, of course, is right on the border of Washington, D.C.
D.C. is sandwiched between Maryland and Virginia.
Right. And so if Maryland leaves and joins the rebellion, then Washington, D.C. is in real trouble because they will be completely surrounded by enemy territory.
Fascinating.